Hello, welcome to Starlight Talks. This week I'm joined by Zoe Martin. We're going to talk about radical love. I do this live stream, Starlight Talks, every week, Wednesdays at 7 Pacific Standard Time for about an hour. So thank you for joining me if you're new. And also thank you for returning for those who have come back. And please come back. Next week, I'm going to have Ed Lynch on. We're going to talk about his story and how he created Michael's Learning Place, which is an amazing place for those with autism. He has after-school activities and drama classes and music classes, and he's created a whole bakery where those with who are much more impacted can work and make money and feel just normal. And it's an awesome place. So he's coming next week, so come join us for that. This week we have Zoe. She's a coach who coaches mothers who have kids with autism, and she teaches some amazing things. So I'm excited to hear more about that and share that with you guys. Please check out the website OurTism.com for my blogs where I write about living on the spectrum. We have support groups and so many other programs, so go check out the website if you haven't. And I can't wait to get started. So as usual, leave comments below and we'll get to as many questions and comments as we possibly can in the hour we have. So thank you for joining. So would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, Zoe?
Yes, hi. I just want to say a big thank you to you. You've been a really huge part in my little journey. When my son was diagnosed with autism, which I'll get to, I stumbled across Asperger's experts and found you through there, and you were a shining light for me, for a mother who was living in fear, and you still are that today. So thank you, and thank you for having me on. I've been so excited. I said to you before, I feel like I'm talking to a rock star. So yeah, a bit about me. So I'm 43. I am a wife and a mother. I coach mothers who are parenting children on the spectrum, and my journey to autism basically brought me back home to what's certainly, my life's purpose here on earth. So yeah, I lead and teach a meditation class on a Monday night. I have my personal training certification and a Reiki practitioner. And I believe every breath we take is a chance for us to return to love. And so it's quite fitting that we're talking about radical love today in this, spectrum space that we live in.
So you're diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and that was only pretty recent for you. And I love talking about everyone's different experience with going through that journey. So I'd love to know what that felt like for you to get that understanding of yourself.
Yeah. Well, I guess, it's sort of 19 months ago that my son was diagnosed. So within a month, my son, who's now 9, was diagnosed. A week later, my husband was diagnosed. And then 2 weeks after that, my daughter. So, 19 months ago, I was getting around thinking that I was the neurotypical mother with a family on the spectrum. And as their journey went along, and especially delving into my daughter, because as we know, girls present typically very differently. It then started raising questions in me, and I started reflecting, and I have just finished a book, Thank You, Autism, and in that book I was saying I'm the neurotypical mum, and then it got to the end of writing that, and my intuition just kept saying, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. And you better get this sorted before that book goes to print. And that's the universe working for me. And off I went for assessment and received my diagnosis. I've only had it a couple of months. It was a week before my birthday. And I knew you would ask me about this because I watched all your lives. And You know, it's interesting because I've done a little bit of reflection. I felt like I had about 300 breakdowns in the 2 weeks leading up to my appointment for the assessment. And I think that was just all the realizations and all the pain, I guess, coming up from my childhood and teens and 20s. So by the time I got the diagnosis, I sort of followed the same thing that I had with my kids and husband. I cried myself to sleep that night. And then I just woke up at peace, like especially for me. It was like all this time I have presented as this normal, and I love that word, normal, you know, neurotypical person, but then living these other lives behind the scenes, always thinking that something's missing, something's not right with me. And with the actual diagnosis, I'd been through so much of the grief and the social conditionings and the limited beliefs around being diagnosed with Asperger's when my family was diagnosed with it. So 18 months later, by the time I got it, I was like proud. I'm like, yeah, damn straight I am. And this is awesome. And like, yes, there are challenges, but, you know, I am proud. And so it's just been awesome for me. It really has. And it will continue to unravel. I haven't done a whole lot of thinking about it because I haven't created the space. I'm a mum. I'm a busy mum. I'm really here for my kids, you know, my coaching clients. But it'll unravel in its own time. And it's going to be really interesting, especially from 17 to sort of 28. A lot went on in those years. And if I had known that I had this wiring, yeah, things would have been different. Yeah. And that just fuels me on to, you know, like you get up every day to serve, to make this space on the spectrum, you know, better and better and better. And it's getting better and better and better.
So I found that it's very different, those who experience early diagnosis versus a much later diagnosis, how that connection is very different to the label of autism, where people who find out much earlier, especially if you're a parent finding out about your kid, it can be more of a depressing situation because right there you have this whole future you built in your mind about what could possibly be. You're like, well, what's it going to look like now? Where when there's that later diagnosis, you're like, oh, well, that makes so much sense why things were the way it was. And this is so helpful. And so you have some different reactions, and not that one's better than the other. So your story is just very interesting because you went through your entire family being diagnosed. You got early diagnosis, later diagnosis. So and you were probably questioning the whole time, like, oh, what is autistic? What is neurotypical? Am I this? Am I that?
And it's so valid what you're saying. And the beauty of where I get to sit in life is I see my children who struggle with the diagnosis, with the label. You know, my son just turned 9 and my daughter is about to turn 8 in a couple of weeks. And my son, I remember when I went to his psychologist and went, you've got to tell him. He thinks he's a monster. He's starting to say he's a monster. And these kids on the spectrum, and, you know, like it's a next level intuitive mind that we have. And he knew something wasn't right, something wasn't in alignment. And I remember going to his psychologist and went, the time is now. He needs to be told. And we were blessed, our psychologist, her mentor was Tony Atwood. So, you know, we've just been in the best of the best hands and we're so grateful. And I remember her drawing this picture of a brain and telling him, well, he came home and he was elated that he'd been shown all these awesome superpowers and all his struggles. But then after that, he was just so defensive about it from the moment he woke up the next day. And, you know, with my daughter, she says things, she's different. Why is she Asperger's? Why isn't she normal? So, you know, I really get to see exactly what you've just said. And I'm just so privileged to have gone through all that grieving process and all that social conditioning and throwing out old school parenting and stripping everything back, that I can now show up for them and help them. Like, it's okay. Yes, we are different. I remember someone said one day, it's like you're running Windows and I'm running a Mac. And I was just like, oh, yes. You know, it's same, but different. And that's not to glorify it or romanticize autism, because we all know, you know, the trauma that can come with it. And that's what I love about your message and last week's interview, you know, the spotlight on the possibilities. You know, and there's a lot of people say that this world is set up for the neurotypicals, and a lot of people keep playing that story. And, you know, I'm sort of, I don't know, I'm starting to become in argument with that, because I believe we do have here a world that is set up for us. We just have to work a little harder to find those little portals. You know, and that's what you do every day by showing up, helping, and what I try and do. And, you know, if you videoed our house, it's a sensory playground. It's very bare, you know, visually. And it's all just about sensory and input and environment and keeping these kids out of defense mode, you know, because we all know that once they go into that, yeah.
We got a few people saying hello, so I just want to say hi to Richard and Kevin for coming back every week, and lots of new people. Hi, Corey. Hi, Tammy. Thank you for joining. I don't know if you can see the comments, but they're coming in.
Cool. Oh, there's my Auntie Betty. Hello.
So thank you guys for joining, and please start asking questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. Yeah. I love when it's interactive with you guys, the audience.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's really important to do what works rather than what you think you should be doing, where there's a lot set up in the world like this is the norm, and if you're not doing the norm, then you're not doing it right. Like in school, especially as a kid, like you have to hit these milestones, and you have to at the right time in the grade level, and be learning the right things in the right order. And that's not true at all. You don't need to, there's no time limit to reaching a milestone. You have your whole life to figure it out, and everyone meets it in their own time. And just because you're not getting it doesn't mean you'll never get it. That's not what that means. And it's okay to take your time. It's way more stressful to be like, okay, you have to beat it by this time. There's no reason to put that stress on yourself. So if it's not happening, then just take your time. And so I think there's a lot of those restrictions that for some reason we put on ourselves that really don't need to be there. And so when you lift that, you get like such a nicer environment.
You can see your face change when you talk like that, because it, you know, it's freedom. And when we are told that, you know, like the labeling has changed right in the middle of my family being diagnosed. You know, like here in Australia, it's really heavy on autism spectrum disorder under the new DSM-5, and your level 1, 2, or 3. You know, so when you go to the pediatrician and you go, you're told your child has autism spectrum disorder, you know, you start creating all these fears and coming from lack. And that, you know, I've gone from, oh, we can fix autism. You know, that was what I thought in the first week, that they're broken, they need fixing, you know, and it's like what you say, you know, there is no time limit. And I think once we can get rid of all that social conditioning and beliefs, we can then ground down in exactly what you've just said. in your own sweet time. And what's that, the Maori word for autism? You've seen that, it's something, and it means in their own time. And I just think that's so perfect. I was lucky, I guess. Both my children were 3 months premature. So the first 2 years, they did everything later than everybody else. So I'd already been through that fire. So now I'm just like, oh, they'll get to it. They'll be fine.
So we got a question from Tammy. Zoe, how do your friends do in school? My grandson is 16 and has a horrible time in school. So are you asking about her children? Is that what you mean by friends? Oh, okay. So there's another comment where she clarifies children.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so I guess my children are 9 and 8. So I'm yet to go through those teen years. I do speak to mums who have children in those years, and social situations are hard for my kids, and that's the truth. They started back school yesterday. My daughter was already in what's termed here the sick bay, so the sick room at school, because going back into all of that social stuff, just her anxiety peaked so much that she's physically sick. And that was one of the main things that led us to her diagnosis, was she was in the sick bay every day. And as a mother, when your child is 6, you hope that when that bell rings for lunch break, that your child is just running out to meet her friends and having a wonderful time. And that wasn't the case. So look, they struggle. My son, he can be quite fiery and sort of police his peers. So, things like that aren't easy. They've had a lot of therapy, a lot of positive therapy around social situations. And we have so many open conversations here about that, about everyone has an opinion. We like different things, because in the end, is life. And these are things that, regardless of their wiring, it's part of it. But yeah, it's hard for them. My daughter, she had a really deep conversation with me last night at bedtime and was saying that yesterday at school she lied to fit into her friends. And she said, "Don't get mad at me, Mum." And I went, "I'm not mad." I said, "What did you lie about, doll?" She said, "I told them I had a lot more slime at home than I really got." And I just thought, oh, goodness, for her to, at the age of 7, already be doing that to try and fit in and be liked. The beauty of it was it opened up conversations for us to have around that about, cool. I said, she goes, "I want to be cool." And I said, well, coolness comes from within. It's not in what you wear. And yeah, so look, I think a lot of people with our wiring, our Asperger's wiring, struggle socially.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Girls on the spectrum pick up more on that stuff than the guys, which is where that masking comes in. So you'll see girls mimicking and lying and acting like these other girls that they want to be friends with and hang out with. So in that way, that's why it's not diagnosed as much with girls, because they're pretending what they think they're supposed to be like, where the guys get frustrated and get angry, and they don't, because in the guy world, it's way more physical, or the girl world is way more mental, starting at a very, very young age. So you'll see those little nuances where like the girls will say, "Yeah, I'm interested in that too," when they're really not, or the guys will just be like, "Yeah, I don't want to do that," and walk away.
That is so my life here with my two. I'm so blessed that I got a boy and girl, and I can experience the absolute polar opposites.
I remember talking with my sister about like what we would do if we redid those really young age at school, and I don't know how I would tell a younger person this, but it's just like now with hindsight, is like I was focused on such the wrong things. Like the grading system was so harsh, and I was like, I need to get a really good grade and I need to do this. And it's just like, your grades don't matter at that age at all. They don't. And I was like, why was I so focused on that and not focused on having fun? And like, I would have gotten as many happy dots or stickers for my chart, gotten a bunch of toys and played with my friends and not worried. Like, who cares if I got in trouble? Like, my parents would be like, she's a kid figuring things out. But I was so like, I need to follow all the rules and I don't understand them, but I'm going to follow them and I'm going to get straight A's even though I don't know how the point system works. And I was like so frustrated and angry all the time because I didn't understand anything about school, but I was like, I'm going to succeed in all these areas that like weren't important. You're like, as a kid, it should be just important to explore and try things and have fun. It's really harsh that schools like you can fail at 9 years old for some reason. Like, you can get a failure grade, you can get a failure in PE, which is just like running around and playing. Like, I don't understand why that's in our grade system. That makes things so scary for these young kids who don't understand failure. Like, failure should be fun. Like, failure should be okay, and it should be safe to do that because it's going to happen. And we make it so scary.
Oh, you're so right on every level. And I remember when my son was in prep, and everything unravels here, I believe, in prep, because they go from like kindy where they can scurry around and do what they want, and then they're told, sit at the desk, put your hand up, like, it's hilarious. And I remember seeing the principal about his reading, and his reading now is fine. And she said to me, look, if he knows what is the front and what is the back, by the end of prep, he's fine. And I'm like, no worries, we're nailing that.
I did. So we got a question from Richard. So, do you feel there are any drawbacks to getting a late diagnosis? Example, finding a job.
So I can speak from my experience. You know, I don't feel like I don't have regrets in life. I just feel like it's all data that has brought me to where I am. I finished school and got a job in the bank, and then I had a very successful 25-year career in banking and finance. So I guess in looking back and having my diagnosis now, I know why I went for those facts and figures job, that there was no variance, you know, it was this, it was quite black and white. So it suited me, and, you know, I excelled and I did well. And I was only putting some time into thinking about this because I knew you'd ask me about my diagnosis. And when I reflected, I sort of felt like there was two of me, that there was this highly successful person in the career sector, and then this other girl, then socially I was fine. And then this other girl behind the scenes who her emotions were so big. I didn't know what to do with them. So I used all sorts of coping mechanisms from when I was 16 to when I was 28. Because I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't know how I was too much for some people. My emotions were too much for me. So that side of it, for sure, Richard, in that actual person, an early diagnosis would have helped me so much. And as I'm in this space, and especially with us women who are diagnosed later, a lot of them are like seen to be, you know, bipolar and all these sort of things in their early 20s back then, because Asperger's wasn't really a thing. Like, I'm talking here, you know, like that's 20 years ago. I'm just the biggest believer that diagnosis for me and for my family, take me out of it, has just been the best thing. And hence my title of my book is Thank You, Autism, which I was like, oh God, is that offending people? But it has been our greatest gift, diagnosis. You know, and I say a lot, when you don't know, you don't know. And now we know, you know, we are educated, we are empowered, and, you know, we're kicking goals. You know, and my kids, they're going to have a good life. It's going to be hard, but, you know, it's going to be good, you know, just like your life.
Yeah. I think that's a really good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to get in a little bit before we get to our next question. What can you explain what radical love is?
Yeah. So radical love to me is, I realized that the love that I had prior to this journey needed an upgrade. It wasn't going to be enough to get me through to where I am today and to lead my family out of the darkest years of my life, you know, from when my son was, you know, sort of 4 to 7. Those 3 years, some of the darkest years. And I know I won't ever have as dark times as we did then as a family. And radical love is a love, you know, that is fueled by acceptance. You know, so many people can be in argument with how their life is, especially when their children are on the spectrum. And there's so many reasons for that, and you talk about that for 10 years. But when you can come to a place of acceptance for how your children are today, you know, and that they're not broken and they certainly don't need fixing and that nothing is wrong, you know, the love you have changes and how you see things change. You know, and that concept can be radical. And that's where I get that word from. And I hope in what I do every day in this world, that, you know, that we all just are, you know, whether you're neurotypical, autistic, ADHD, whatever your wiring is, you know, that we just have the freedom to be, you know, just how we are, meet everyone where they're at, you know, and that's a radical concept to some. It's not to me. It's, you know, yeah, it's how I envisage the world, and I won't lose sight of that.
Yeah, I love that because I'm always talking to parents. For some reason, they love to react out of this fear and this what if. Like they project all these fears onto their kid, and instead of going, oh, this is my kid and this is actually what's happening, and accepting that and loving that and helping them through that, there's this, well, we got to prevent this from happening and we got to stop that and we got to do this so that doesn't happen. And when you do that, you create a world that's based in fear, and then the kid's afraid of disappointing you, of failing you, and they want to meet these expectations that aren't who they are or that they don't believe they are, and it becomes a very toxic environment when that happens. And so when you go, okay, hold on, what I'm doing is reacting out of fear. I'm allowed to feel fear, but let's not react on it. Instead, stay in reality and in the present and go, here's who my kid is. This is actually what's happening. If they're not being bullied, but I'm worried that they will, I'm not going to react as if they are already being bullied and going, don't wear that, don't say that. Because then you're stopping them from being themselves. Be like, okay, it's okay to be yourself. And then allow them to shine and accept that and love them for who they are. I think that's something that I talk about a lot, because there's a lot of things where people are like, oh, my kid is 2 and they still don't talk. Are they never going to talk? How do I get them into speech therapy and get them to do all these things? And I'm like, why are you afraid they aren't going to talk? They're 2 years old. They have so much time to figure it out. And what if they don't, you know? Then you deal with that. But right now, you don't know. You don't know.
And that's one of the things that just energetically drew me straight to you, you know, and you've just nailed it right there. And I guess that's why my, you know, mission, vision, purpose is to help the mum, because I believe that she goes first, and my message isn't for the masses, but I believe she does. I believe the fathers follow, but they're wired differently, despite what if they even have a diagnosis, you know. But mums, and I can only talk from a mum because I am one, we have this intuitive, energetic cord to our children. Our kids on the spectrum can even like my kids can even sense what I'm feeling before I can, or they'll call me on it because we talk so openly here. We have written on our bathroom mirror, respond, not react. And that's something we talk about all the time. But if the mother can stand up and take responsibility for her self-regulation, really honour her feelings, and they're huge. You know, these are our children. And not just stuff them down with Netflix and food or wine or all this, and really unpack those feelings. You know, then, you know, she comes to this acceptance, and she's not parenting from fear. And I just love how I just scroll through in Asperger's experts till I see your name, because some of the posts are too much for me. They don't align with me and how I live. And I think you know what I mean. I just scroll through until I see you've said something, and then I'll stop, or Danny. But yeah, you just bring such an awesome message to that, and I just love it. But, you know, a mother needs to take responsibility for those energetic ties. And it's something here, like our kids go to bed at 7:30, and there's a lot of pressure work to be done then. They are buggered. They are out of spoons. You know, they're out of tools. And if I'm showing up exhausted, cranky, in argument, needing to fall in a heap, they sense that. And that's even going to even more unsettle them, let alone when I'm doing the pressure on them, or I can't even do it. You know, so there's a lot for the mum, I think, in this to, take ownership of. Because one thing we've realised here, my son is weaning off a medication he has asked to be weaned off, his anxiety medication in the morning. And that's required a whole new level from Scott and I to hold space for him, because it's messy at times. And if we hadn't got to this place of acceptance and our own self-regulation, we wouldn't be able to give him the space to allow what's happening at the moment, because we'd just be yelling and blah, blah, you know. So, yeah, it's sobering when you wake up as a parent and realise, you know, you're a big player in this. It's cool.
We got a question from Corey. Where do you think the line runs between parents knowing their kid is autistic as a teen? How much freedom? Should you be treated any differently? Think 14 to 17 years old. So there's something I come across around 12 to 13 years old. You have that jump to middle school, which in Australia, I believe there's also like a jump there where there's a huge transition, and it's accepted that, okay, these kids are older now and more mature, but they're still met with a lot of the same rules that and they're expected, you know, to have more responsibility, but then they're given curfews and given all these things that they actually didn't have before, because they didn't have really the opportunity to go out. And so then I've seen like so many kids, like where their parents are calling them every 5 minutes, like, tell me where you are every second of the day, putting GPSs on their phone. And so you have someone who's trying to grow up, but then feeling like there's more restrictions on them. So then you get this push and this anger that starts forming, and you get that teenage rebellion where I feel like for me and my parents, there was, certain areas there was definitely that anger, but in other areas, my twin sister was sick a lot, and so I was home alone and had so much freedom, and I was able to walk to my friend's house whenever I wanted to hang out with them and do these things. And if I had a curfew, I didn't really know about it because I didn't want to stay out super late. And so I didn't feel restricted. And so that really, really allowed me to feel that freedom, and that I was growing up and that I had more responsibility. And So we didn't have that tug in those areas. There were other areas where we did have it, like with the computer. I wasn't allowed to be on the computer for these many hours, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like that at that age, everyone starts reacting way more out of fear and goes, "Oh, you can't go out by yourself. You might get kidnapped. You can't stay out too late. You can't stay out after dark. You can't go here by yourself." But the kids all want to grow up, and so you start to get that teenage rebellion, and it happens to even autistic kids, but it happens, they react in different ways because we think differently and feel things a little bit differently. So you'll see more meltdowns and shutdowns, and the nonverbals kicking in and the stimming kicking in, and you're like, what is this weird reaction that I'm getting? And then it's like, well, now you need to go to therapy, and now you need to go to these doctors, and now we have to do this. And they're like, but I don't want to. Why is nobody listening to me? So I feel like that's what happens around that age for most kids.
And I can talk now from, I guess, being that age and now being a mother. And I know, Corey, in those years for me, now I realise that I, was an autistic girl, and the education and seminars and stuff I've done around this, that for girls, they say that their maturation is a few years behind. They say that they can struggle to read cues from boys. And I know certainly here, there's statistics of what they call date rape in Asperger's girls. That is skyrocketing. So for me as a mother with a girl, that's something that I sit bolt upright and pay attention to. And I know in my years, I look back and was confused. And I think that every child is so different. I think, yes, the wiring needs to be taken into account. I keep repeating open, honest conversations. And then I think it's a trial and error thing, like with most things in parenting and in life. Give them a bit of freedom. Say, okay, I'm going to let you do this. You need to check in. Because we have conversations all the time. When I was a kid, as long as our push bike and we were home by dark, everything was sweet. Whereas I can't even let my kids go for a ride more than 1 block away because of what, goes on. So super hard, and it's really individual. And I think it's just trial and error and open conversations, and you'll get, the compromise and the result everyone's chasing.
So how do you decide whether to share your diagnosis with people, especially for a 10-year-old girl who is trying to navigate friendship and is often misunderstood?
I guess once again, it's a real personal thing. I know that it was right for us to share straight away, because of the troubles that my son was having and then what my daughter was having. So we were very open about it. And I guess the biggest thing was that Scott and I had so many conversations, and we really let ourselves experience the pain and the grief around it, and because that's all real. So as parents, if we can ground down and really let those feelings come up, and it's not what I thought how my children's lives would be. And as I said, that social conditioning and limited beliefs, like we really went through all that, and it was painful. And still today, I experience little moments of grief, like last night when my daughter was crying, and I don't think that will ever go away, but it's a different grief now. And, and if your daughter, if you're communicating with her about her Asperger's diagnosis, and if you dealt with the feelings and you're okay with it and realise that she's going to be okay, it's okay, then I think it's just a natural progression that one day she'll be ready or you'll be ready. I think it just happens naturally. And if you can get still enough to tap in to your intuition, to me, it just comes along, you know. And I know people who have never told anybody about their children's diagnosis. I coach mothers who are in that position, and that is fine. And they go, oh, but I want to, but I don't. And I'm like, you know, don't worry about it. It'll happen when the time's right. Just like what you were saying before, or it won't happen. But questions like that expand my heart, because the more you, Chloe, and I keep showing up, doing what we're doing, the more free people will feel to go, yep, hey, I'm running that Asperger's wiring. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I found the more I share, the closer I am with the people that I share with, where the people that don't know, I mean, I wish I didn't have to, but the people that don't know go, oh, that's weird, I don't like that. Where when I share, this is why I do certain things, I'm not going to pick up on those things because of autism, people go, oh, that makes so much more sense. And then they accept it way more when I explain why I am the way I am.
Yeah.
When without that, I felt like there is more of a distance with people who just don't know. And I'm very open about it. But I've accepted it, and I love having that label. Not everyone feels that way, and you have to get there in your own time. And so if you're still dealing with a new diagnosis, or it's been looked at in a negative way for a while, it's going to take a while to get there. And so it starts with you, and then when you're ready to tell it, then I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to share it. And then the other thing why people don't share it can be a really emotional journey to explain your autism and say that you have it. And so it gets really tiring after a while. So you're just like, I don't want to explain it again. I've done it so many times, and I'm just ready to move on with my life and just be. And so that's another reason why people don't want to share it, in case you had someone that went, yeah, autism, let's move on. It could just be that they just don't want to talk about it right now. They just want to talk about something else. And it's something that takes a lot of energy to explain. So there's so many different sides to choosing to share that and choosing not to, finding the right moments to. But I think it's important to at least share it with friends you're close to and family members who are going to be a big part of your life at some point, that should be shared with them.
And I think, you know, when, like you have, when you've grounded down in who you are, when you start sharing, oh God, I could write a book on what people have said. Oh, they don't look autistic. Oh, you don't look autistic. Oh, can you fix that? Oh, what level are you? I could write a book on it, what they've said to my kids and now to me. And I think it's true in what you're saying, that if you've gone through and experienced all the emotions you've got around it, then when you're getting those interesting, we'll call them interesting comments, you know, you can just let them go like, you know, water off a duck's back, and you're not going to be like, ugh, you know, defensive and resentful and.
Richard has a comment. So Richard replied after his comment about the diagnosis. So he said, I do know I have autism. I'm just concerned about how people will react. I'm trying to advance in my job, and I'm afraid they will look down on me if I get an official diagnosis. I appreciate the answer. So, I mean, for me, I found I haven't really run into issues when I share that diagnosis, but I know there are people who for whatever reason their employer wouldn't or couldn't give them the accommodations they need, and they would look down upon. And there's different advice people give, like, should you say you have it in your interview, should you not? But if you have the diagnosis, you do not have to share it if you don't want to. That is personal information. So you can get an official diagnosis, and it comes with like so much information about who you are and your strengths and your weaknesses, which is, I think, only can be a benefit. But you definitely don't have to share it if you're uncomfortable sharing that. I don't know what field you're in. Some fields love the autism, and some fields definitely don't. So there's stereotypes around it, and there's like all different things. So I would say it's really personal, but I would say the diagnosis will never harm you, because you get to choose if you want to share that. If you want to get that official diagnosis, that's really, it's just like, it's a long test and you have to go through that. And so I think that should be where you put your weight, rather than, oh, do I want people to know? Because you don't have to share it.
Yeah. And I think, Richard, as you go along, you're so active in this space here. Your intuition will tell you in whatever situation is right to share it, and when it's not, yeah, you'll know.
Do you think it might be easy for an Aspie to identify another? I would say that we do find each other just because we think similarly. My friends, a lot of them from middle school, did not have a diagnosis at the time and have all been diagnosed with autism. And as we've grown up, we've sort of drifted apart just because our interests are different. But at that age, like, we didn't really figure out, we had a hard time figuring out the social world. And we're like, oh, but you guys had the same issues. And so we related on that, not necessarily about the subjects we were interested in. We're now, because I have a more grasp on socially and have the energy, now I find more people. But I can definitely identify and go, oh, you might have autism there. I relate to that.
Oh, gosh. I'm going to be very careful what I say here, and I'm laughing out of soul recognition. I'm laughing a lot at what you're saying, but I just, oh God, I just feel it on a cellular level. Oh yeah, look, I just seem to go along going, yep, 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 yep. And yeah, look, it, you know, and like, look at me, here I was going like, oh, my husband, he's on the spectrum, you know, he's Asperger's, and yeah, there we go, like attracts like. Yeah, so yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that. But yes, I think it is very, very, very easy. Maybe it's because of how old we are. I'm certainly a lot older than you, Chloe. But, you know, yeah, I think what you're saying is very easy. That's one of our extra superpowers.
Especially once you understand all the aspects of autism, you can be like, oh, that person's in defense mode. Oh, that person's having a sensory overload. You can even go to those minute things and be like, oh, they're stimming. Oh, they're, you know.
Oh, I love it. Yes, it's so true. Oh, I love it.
All right, so please leave any last questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can because we have a few more minutes left. So, how does a mama find balance so she can meet the needs and hold space for their kiddo? Like, so challenging to maintain that energy level.
Yeah, great question, Judy. And this is in everything I do to help mums. You know, I've got a course coming out, Nourish the Nourisher, and it's a chapter in my book. No one's going to nourish us as the mother, and we have to stand up and work out how we are going to look after ourselves better. And I feel like I've had every situation known to man thrown at me from mums. Mums who have no family here, mums who have lots of support, full-time working mums, shift working mums. Everyone is so different, and you know, there are simple things, and as a mother, we are super smart. You know, we really are. And if we can try and find some stillness, you will be able to work out what you can do to start nourishing yourself. You know, and I love it. Reach out to me. We can chat on Messenger. It's just what I love. You know, it comes down to having an extra glass of water. It comes down to talking to yourself kindly, unpacking your feelings with someone who can hold space for you. You know, I did a live the other day. We can't expect to feed ourselves garbage and feed our children garbage and show up with a decent amount of energy. You know, our attitude affects our energy. And every mother has a certain amount of time, a certain amount of toolbox things, resources, and you've just got to find how, with little baby steps, it's the little incremental things you do every day that you'll start to get some forward momentum. Because, you know, I'll be the first one to tell you that I was a mother who was just exhausted, who yelled, screamed, was depleted, and lived from lack. And that is not how I live now at all. So it's effort, you know, it's discipline, but it's not discipline from like hating yourself. It's actually discipline because you love yourself. So yeah, it can be overwhelming. So please reach out. We, you know, happy to chat and start small. You know, follow my page. I'm always giving away little things. You know, and my best tip today, the simple thing is just start breathing. You know, I talk about it all the time, the power in the pause. You know, if you can just take a breath and pause, you know, things will start changing in your life. But yeah, look, it's hard, but it's so possible. If you want to change, change will happen.
So I really love telling stories and hearing stories about that the autistic journey and how little things start, you know, making sense. Like, oh, that's why I do those little things. And so I'm curious if you see anything in your children that remind you of things maybe you did as a child or things you do that you're like, oh, that's obviously autism.
Yeah, like with my daughter, you know, we used to make a joke that she lived in unicorn land. You know, that, oh, she's so lovely. She's my little Zen, you know, Buddha yogi, and she lives in this unicorn land. And I remember as a child, I used to, you know, withdraw. I used to go to my room and withdraw and take myself somewhere else. And we realised with her, you know, that's what she was doing, and that was her wiring, doing that. You know, my son, he gets an idea in his head and then it is just, you know, that hyper focus, which will be a great thing in his life. I tell you, the kid is going to go places. And, you know, that's certainly, like, he used to line all his cars up, you know, and if they were out of order, he'd just go ballistic. But that hyper focus he has, you know, used to drive me crazy, whereas now I embrace it. I go, cool, look at you go, you know, and look at you getting right into all this. You know, that's certainly his wiring. Yeah.
So do you have any last things you'd like to share with the audience, a message or something, like some words of wisdom?
Yeah, look, for the mum, you know, I am the biggest believer. I feel like I might cry, but I'm the biggest believer in our children chose us. And I believe we chose them, and you're the perfect mum for them, the perfect mum. And, you know, if you can unpack those feelings, start honouring yourself, you're going to be able to be that mum that your heart aches for you to be and that your kids need you to be.
All right. So I've been teasing you guys that there's a special announcement. So I'm excited. This is actually the first time I got permission to be the first person to share this publicly. So you guys are getting this information before anyone else. my friend Corey, who has actually been asking some questions, Corey Davis, he has Asperger's, and his special interest is movies. And he told me that growing up he'd go to 12 movies a week, and so he started creating events where he loves the 90s, and so he would screen these little movies from the 90s. And so he's having this really big event coming up where he wanted some of the revenue to go to OurTism. So the movie is 10 Things I Hate About You, and it's coming up in March, on March 1st. So if you guys want to check out, I have the event page linked in the description. There will be a Q&A with cast and crew at this event, where you can get pictures and signed autographs that will be raffled off. And all of the cast is in touch, so that's super exciting stuff. There's gonna be drinks and food, vendors, including Autism there, and there will be a dance, and it's all 90s themed. So it's really exciting stuff. So check that out. So more information will come, and we'll let you know as soon as we know anything, and when we can share it with you. It'll all be on the OurTism page or my page, and definitely go click interested on that event page to get as much information as you can, so you can get tickets for that event as soon as they come out, because it will sell out. I'm told it's gonna sell out quick. So excited to share that with you guys first. It is in LA, so I know I'm gonna have a bunch of views from Australia tonight. If you want to come out, we'd love to have you. So the Instagram to Corey's page as well is linked. Everything is linked to Zoe Martin's page. So it's all there in the description. Go check out all those cool stuff. Check out OurTism.com, where I write about living with autism on my blog, and all our support groups and life map. And definitely come back next week. I do these live streams every Wednesday, 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Next week, I'm going to have Ed Lynch. He's absolutely amazing. I'm so excited to talk to him. He runs Michael's Learning Place, which is such a great place. Go check that out as well. So thank you for joining me, Zoe.
Oh, thank you. It's been great.
And thank you all for watching. It's been really great having so many questions today and so many comments.
Awesome.
So awesome. And thank you, Richard and Kevin, for coming back every week, and all the new people asking questions. Is really great.
Cool.
All right. Stay colorful.
Yes, bye.